Hi, my name is Kees, and welcome. I'm going to talk with Hidde. Hidde is one of my good friends, and we have a lot of, I think, inspiring conversations that we sometimes want to also put on camera or record for other people to enjoy. So that's what our intention is right now. And Hidde is a holistic coach and also a psychedelic guide. And I've enjoyed some of his guidance, and I love him as a person. So here we go. Hidde, you sent me before this talk, you sent me a little bit about individuation, which we're going to talk about, which I thought was interesting. And it's a different perspective, which I think in a lot of, let's say, the scene that I'm in with the non-duality stuff, it's not so often spoken of. So it's really cool, I think, to explore. And also what's on the list for today is talking a little bit about masks and from the head to the body and why body work and sensation with the body is interesting. And then ceremonies, you do a lot of ceremonies. And I think we could also, in, let's say, my scene, you would say retreats or maybe deep dives that you either do yourself or with a teacher versus the integration of that, right? The spiritual high versus the integration. And let's see how far we get, but we've also have all these other beautiful topics, which we've agreed about talking about. And I think last time we did one in Dutch, which is on my Dutch channel, which I'll link below. It was about enlightenment, where I shared my experiences, you shared your experiences of our perception of enlightenment, our experiences with that. So I think that's cool for the Dutchies to maybe check out. And let's maybe start with this individuation, right? How would you define that, and what is your, let's say, how did you find this subject? How did the subject spark your interest?
Yeah, first of all, thanks for having me, Kees. Really cool to dive deep into these topics with you. So individuation is a term coined by Carl Jung, and it is actually often associated with the second half of life, particularly around the age of 40. So as individuals grapple with existential questions and seeking meaning in life. And this is exactly the point where I am. I'm turning 40 in not too long, and I've noticed that a lot has shifted for me in the last years, months, how I look at myself, how I look at relationships, how I look at work, and mostly how I look at giving meaning to life. So when I first came across this term, it really resonated and touched a lot of themes that were actively playing out in my life. So I started diving more into the topic and realized that it's kind of a map of the processes that I'm going through, and also very relatable to the work I think we're both doing, you as a coach, spiritual coach, and me as a psychedelic facilitator and as a holistic coach. And a lot of these themes are intertwined with not only my own experiences in life in this phase, but also what I come across in teams with my clients. So I thought it's a valuable topic to examine together. And also in the light of our last talk about enlightenment, that it gives another very interesting side of the ego, the self, the false self, and the spiritual ego, and basically the shedding of masks.
Yeah, because it's interesting. I'd never heard of the term, so I recently I googled it and see what's the meaning of this. And what I understood is that it's a process where you look at becoming the real you. And I think the real you, or the natural self or something like that, where in contrast to that, you could say the conditioned self, or let's say the self that was influenced by society, parents, growing up in a certain neighborhood with, certain friends, etc., has conditioned us in a certain way, where we, not to say are unnatural, but we are, let's say, conditioned to act and behave in a certain way. And is that actually matching our deeper self, we could say, or are we living from that deeper self. And
Yeah, that's a good way of describing it. As Jung describes it, it's about shedding layers of the false persona, which has to do all with that conditioning from society, but also from how we were brought up. And I think it's good to state that even though it generally occurs around the midlife, around 40, that it's not a one-time event, but it's a continuous journey of self-discovery and also of integration. So it involves bringing conscious and unconscious aspects of the psyche into balance, basically.
yeah, and how have you? We could talk about how I have noticed that, but how have you noticed that? Because you said before that you're in this process, that you're noticing this in your life.
Yeah, for me personally, I think it's largely due to the work I do with plant medicine and with psychedelics, where you get offered this different perspective on many things, but mostly on how you look at your experience of reality. And so that was tested many times along the way in my own experiences, in deep dives with with psychedelic experiences, but also what I come across working with people, that often how we come out of an experience like that, it kind of shatters our view of many things. And a term often associated with psychedelic journeys is the ego death. So it's like the stripping away of all these ideas we have about who we are and why we are like that. So that inspired that search of a truer version of myself, even before I heard of the term individuation. So
yeah, because I've referred to ego death in the past about either a permanent or a temporary loss of the sense of self, right? In which automatically there's union, because if there's no self, there's just everything. And is that what you also mean with ego death, or do you mean, let's say, a piece of the ego, losing a piece of the ego, let's say, or losing some conditioning,
yeah,
which can also give you a certain sense of new configuration, right? If you lose a sense of ego, or you do shadow work, I'm very familiar with the term shadow work, right? So we work on a piece of ourselves, or a piece falls away, right? Because it's a removal process. It's not really an adding on to. Then, there's automatically a sort of sense of I need to orient in a new way because there's a new self. So, is that what you mean with ego death then, or do you mean sense of self losing?
Exactly. That's exactly what I mean. And it starts with one peeling of a layer away, and then it becomes a continuous process of reviewing old versions, habits, and perspectives on life to see how they match up with who you are in the moment, but also who you're becoming. And Jung also ties it into not so much what we want from this persona perspective, but much more as a longing of the soul to have certain experiences and grow through certain things that at the surface level are often quite uncomfortable, but it's actually the longing of the soul to transform, to transmute, and to grow through that. So last talk we spoke about enlightenment, but even when you speak of personal growth, it's often tempting to float upwards towards ideas of transcendence, bliss, or like spiritual arrival. But I found that the real work, the real liberating work, often more looks like descending into the uncomfortable, into the shadow, as you said already, and mostly into the body, and eventually into truth. So for me, individuation isn't a path of becoming perfect, it's a path of becoming whole, which means like reclaiming lost parts of yourself, integrating trauma, facing all the illusions we've built to survive, and reconnecting with a self, like capital S, that was never that was never really broken to begin with.
Yeah, because it's interesting what you say there, because I would define like enlightenment as sort of a permanent ego death, right? But for that to occur, or for that to happen, there's a lot of stuff we need to integrate, because that's actually permanent wholeness in a way, right? So when what often happens is, either in these psychedelic experiences or through meditation or other things, we can get, let's say, a temporary ego death, but it's like a sort of temporary wholeness experience through which we actually see ourself and our everything as whole already, because we are whole already, or everything is perfect in a way already, right? Not as the ego would define it, like you said. But then living from that place, as in sort of seeing all those things as whole, and then the let's say the outer self transforming in the way where the inner wholeness can shine even in the outer self. Let's say that takes some that takes a lot of shadow work, or a lot of integration, or a lot of awareness with all these pieces, right? Looking at all these pieces, all these pieces coming out, often also screaming and kicking, right? It's like it's not that often when these things come out, it's also often because they're triggered, right? And that's not very comfortable. Often it's like either you're angry, or something comes up, or life gives you something to look at that piece. That's what I often have seen as well. That I get into an argument or something with my girlfriend, or I don't know, something happens, and I'm like, why does this happen? And then it's so clear, like after I look into it, or I sit with it, I meditate with it, then it's so clear that it comes for a certain reason. I recently had something where we were preparing for a birthday, and then I felt like the stress of everybody, and I was not so comfortable with that. I was a little bit triggered of that, and I wanted to sort of basically say, you guys don't be so stressed. It's just a birthday, right? But then act stressed as well, like that. So I looked inward and saw myself, this is after some meditation, but I saw myself like sitting on the couch as a young kid in a sort of similar situation with my parents running around. And I thought, all dressed up. I thought, okay, this is the thing that came up, like the feeling of me back on the couch. So often it's very much related, and this has nothing to do with, your parents or something like that. It's just life, right? But this happens in all these different situations where you get to process. If you get a sense of wholeness, actually all the things which don't feel whole want to come up and out. And usually that's, let's say, my lingo, that would be, the deconditioning after the spiritual awakening process. But I think when Jung is talking about this, it sounds very similar to me, because Jung was definitely very spiritually active, you could say. So.
Yeah, I agree. So maybe it's good to also differentiate between what individuation is and why it's not self-help. As individuation to me is the slow, uncomfortable process of remembering who you are beneath the conditioning, the survival strategies, and so-called ego performances. So it's not about becoming someone better, as most self-help things are. It's about becoming real, not idealized or enlightened, but honest and mostly embodied. Or undivided, as a different way of saying whole. And it's different from self-improvement or personal growth, as these tools often help you build a stronger mask and kind of upgrade your coping strategies. And individuation, on the other hand, is it asks of you to shed what no longer fits. And even if that you had before, even if it got you love or validation or safety, so it's not about managing life better. It's about really dying the false self. So the true one can breathe.
Beautiful. It's like dissolving the self, right? Versus, like you said, upgrading the self. Or I think often I work sometimes with, when I work with people on the mental side of things. So I see like you conditioning. When you break that down, it's kind of like beliefs to me. And beliefs, they have like an emotional, an energetic, and a mental component. And often I have different ways of working with those three. And then with the mental component, I often do like things looking at the different direct beliefs that people have. So let's say I'm not good enough or something like that, which often is very much related to how something has happened in their life. And it's interesting because when you use a certain wording, you can choose and go back and basically interpret things in a different way, choose a different interpretation. But when we choose a different interpretation, in a way, it's kind of like it could be upgrading or strengthening the self. But with this process, whether we call it spiritual awakening or individuation or something like that, it doesn't have to be replaced with something else, right? It doesn't have to be replaced with a better belief. You don't have to say to yourself, I am good enough, or something like that. It can be just that the tension which was related to this, I'm not good enough, or I am like this or like that, or I'm not worthy or something like that, falls away. By seeing that it's, let's say, on the mental side, at least not true. And then often there's an emotional and an energetic component to work with. And sometimes that moves automatically when we mentally recognize the truth, we could say. But, sometimes there's something left to feel, of course. But I think it illustrates this, this not needing to replace the belief, right, with something else. I think really illustrates this process because, stuff comes up and you don't have to, per se, also take the role of the person that knows best how to then work with this, right? Because that's also what I see a lot, is that there's this intelligence of life on how this process works, which I think is fascinating to me. And the more we can trust that, or the more we can be with that, it almost seems like the easier this process can go for people. Because definitely for me, I took it and wanted to analyze everything that came up and wanted to, know it, use my techniques and et cetera. So I wanted to sort of own it. And that definitely, life definitely slapped me in the face with that, with like some burnout a couple of times, not severe, but really pointing me at, if you're going to use your energy to sort of get in the way of this process by wanting to do everything yourself, then we're just going to make you lose your energy, right? So because we want to do this our way, in a way, it's not, I'm not saying that life is something else than you are, right? But it's just way more powerful. You could say the big self is way more powerful than the small self. So if the small self is in the way, then the big self will figure something out, right?
Yeah, it reminds me of this video I saw of Jim Carrey explaining what depression is. And I've been depressed in many different phases in my life, like really having no positive outlook. And how he explains it is that when we're depressed, first of all, it's a longing for deep rest, but also we get depressed when we're playing a part that no longer fits us. So if you're trying to fit yourself into this persona or character that you've actually already evolved, or that your soul is longing to evolve, when you hold on too tightly to that version, then you get you feel the effects. And when I look back at my own phases of feeling in such a way, that was definitely the reason behind it, because I was just holding on too tightly to versions of myself that I've already passed. So I'm wondering, if you're working with clients, how can you tell if someone is just spiritually improving or if they're doing the real inner work?
And what do you mean with spiritual improving?
Well, someone can talk about peace, or someone can come up with a lot of nice spiritual lingo, but at the end of the day, it's much other qualities that show if someone is actually doing the work.
Yeah, so first of all, you can know a lot about, it's kind of like going to the gym in a way. You can know so much about, how to do a bicep curl or how to do a pull-up or something like that. We can talk gym lingo, you can look like somebody that goes to the gym, which is also, I think, a thing, like looking spiritually in a certain way, or eating spiritual stuff. And even though that's great, right? There's nothing wrong with that. That can definitely does not have to relate to how much actual spiritual work you do. So my question would be, what's your spiritual practice, right? How much are you doing that? Which is not really, it's not exactly like going to the gym, right? So it's not that it's linear in the same way, but there is some correlation there. Some people seem to not really need that, but I often see that because they're so loving, they're so surrendered, you could say, they're so open, and they are noticing, let's say, the roller coaster of that, then I know it's right. So if somebody's not doing a lot of honest spiritual practice, you could say, or they're not really open to looking at their suffering.
Yes.
Or they just are not experiencing that suffering yet, which is totally fine, because what the process we're talking about, to me, is like when you've had a sort of wholeness experience in whatever way possible, stuff will come up. And for some, that's a die-hard roller coaster. For some, it's quite an easy, enjoyable roller coaster. So it's somewhere in between. And I think I had a middle experience that sometimes I was like, and it was quite hard, but sometimes it was also quite okay. But I had other people who also have phases where it's hard, so it can come in all these different shapes. But I see, if people are talking about their suffering, if they're looking inward, then and they're actively coming up with stuff, and they're doing some spiritual practice, then and they can talk about themselves in that way, like things coming up for them, etc. Then I know that they're in this process and they're actually getting closer to, let's say, they're peeling the layers. Other people that are not there yet, which is totally fine, I was there too, in order for them to make progress, it's important for them to often do a spiritual practice. Right? For me, I did 5 years of meditation which was just quiet and calm, before I just had a big experience. But I did 5 years of almost daily, minimum 20 minutes. But it was, for me, fun. I liked it. I liked meditation, and I had no idea that this was going to happen. I was not so much interested. I would read Eckhart Tolle, and I was like, "What is this? I don't understand anything." It's like, yeah, but I like the vibe. That was always there. I like the vibe, though. So yeah, it's either the spiritual practice or an earnest spiritual practice where you're not really doing it, which is also nice. But I saw that a lot. I'm living a little bit outside of Amsterdam, but I used to live in the center of Amsterdam, and I taught at all these spiritual centers, which was amazing. But I saw a lot of people that are very active with some spiritual practice, but I do not think that a lot of those practices were really looking at people suffering. So that's fine. You can either go deep or you can go wide, right? Like on your level, discover all these different things on your, you could say, quote unquote, level of consciousness. And I saw that a lot, like all these beautiful practices, right? But not really, I would say looking the part, but not per se. I would joke with other friends that not really looking at the suffering, right? It's a scene. You could say it's a scene.
Yeah.
Which is, again, beautiful because it's a very loving scene, I think.
Yeah, where there's definitely also a lot of spiritual bypassing just covered up with bypassy quotes. And I mean, I've been there myself, so I speak out of experience. But yeah, maybe a spiritual practice for a lot of people already sounds like, oh, they have to actively do something, but maybe it's, for me nowadays, it's more about not distracting myself, just being with what is, or trying to actively invite in certain uncomfortable feelings or sensations, just staring out of the window, maybe listening to music, and just seeing what comes up without being on my phone all the time, or binging Netflix or going out. So for me, it shows in the nervous system, it's and also people that do the real work of feeling, so to say, it makes them more human and not more perfect.
Definitely. And they're still going to show up as a certain character, right? Because it's like a part of God that wants to express in this way, right? And then I've once, like one spiritual teacher, I asked like in person about this whole, you could say, enlightenment, and he said, well, I thought, well, is this not just a good thing, And he said, well, it doesn't have to be a good thing. And I said, why? He said, if you're an asshole, you become an unlimited asshole, right? So it's not per se a good thing. And then unlimited in a way that you're not blocked by that other conditioning. But if God wants to make you an asshole, you could say, you're very free to play that part. It's not per se the best thing for everybody. So, and especially for me, realizing a lot of this quote unquote states that I used to read about, it has become even deeper that somehow this was an inevitable for me. It was, or you could say, I'm using the word me, but I don't really feel a me, but that's just the words, right? But it's not that that's better than how I used to be in any way, right? It's just a little bit different. I feel different. There's different sensations, etc. But it's not better. So especially because before I thought of spiritual progress, I thought there was a part of me that was thinking, this is really cool, right? But then when the real thing happened, I automatically realized, like, how can this ever be better than that? Like, how can something not be enlightened in a way that also falls away? Like, what's that? The self is just a sensation. So every sensation is this, right?
Yeah.
So I wouldn't go looking for like either you're on fire with this process and you're interested in this, and then it's fine, right? But I don't think that that's necessary. But a little bit what I do think is great for everybody is just to enjoy what they get, right? And so I think you was the first one to talk about Bashar for me, and he has a thing of like not that I'm a big fan, but I think the formula, right, is something like follow your excitement.
Follow your bliss. Yeah, that's
Follow your bliss, or yeah,
in a lot of spiritual teachings.
Yeah, and I think your excitement, I think that is definitely extremely important, and a lot more. That is, you could say that is your spiritual practice almost. That's amazing. That's amazing. So yeah, and especially if we're talking about at some point, and I think that also comes with growing up, right? You feel that there's more to life than just pleasure, but you want things to feel right, or they click in, they feel important, they feel meaningful, I think.
Yeah.
So then that becomes your excitement as well.
So maybe that's a good bridge to examine what masks we had to shed before.
What comes up for you?
Yeah, there are many. So the spiritual know-it-all, everything, but also just the nice guy, or the pleaser, the one that had it all figured out. I really had to give up being liked in order to be free in a way. And for me that meant facing the ways I abandoned myself just to belong somewhere, and that's something that I'm still recognizing here and there. But
how beautiful the thing you said there, which I think there must be some, when I look at people's identity, I often look at what's the core identity here, because I feel that identity is like a core theme, right? A core pain often, which creates the sense of self. And the abandonment that comes out for you instantly when you say this. It's like, cannot not share.
A lot of these things that I built, from careers, identities, and even relationships, I realized that they were actually like rooted in fear of being seen, fear of not being enough, and letting that unravel. That was a real death, but it also made space for something far more alive, in a sense.
Yeah, you feel so much more open, and I think also like in a beautiful way, like a more vulnerability, right? Which I think is really cool.
And learning the difference between who you are and who I thought I had to be. That now I recognize it's something that I can really feel in the body. There's like a weight, a constriction, a numbness to that false self, and the true self feels risky but light, aligned. So the more honest I got with myself, the more I could feel the difference between performance and presence.
Presence, beautiful, yeah. Performance, yeah. That I think that also really makes sense for me. Is I think I had the same thing. I think we had a little bit of the same coping. So for me, the deepest thing was to that I felt not good enough because I couldn't prevent the suffering that I felt as a kid, but also just in general in the world. And I felt that that was my responsibility to fix that, which is a huge burden. And I think in some way I'm meant to play a role there, but it's not that I must do anything. It's like So that was my biggest thing. And because I did not feel good enough, it was I had the tactic. I think two big ego tactics is just to either deflate or inflate, right? And I think you as well inflated and wanted to be, cool and seen and things like that. And yeah, I did. I worked very hard for that. and I was successful at some point. So in certain things, I think at some point, like I had a business career. A lot of people looked at. I trained at some point for a 6-pack, and it's like all these different things. I was really into trying to have like girls interested in me and things like that. I think a lot of the young boy things, right? So
yeah,
that makes sense. But it took, I think, about 10 years of me really not actively engaging that, and actually life sort of made me unable to be disciplined for a while. Just allowed me only to just go with the flow. And I had been so disciplined before that kind of sort of stopped. Even when I tried something, like after 2 days, I would already abandon it. But right now, if something feels very much aligned, I can, do that easily. But because it feels so much more aligned, right? And if it doesn't feel aligned, it's almost dead instantly. And it used to be very much like, if it just sounded good for me, I would discipline myself to do it. So
yeah. And how does that translate into your sensations in the body? Maybe to give a bit more context, like for me, the body is really essential in doing this work. Yeah, because that's where the trauma lives. They say the issue is in the tissue, and the healing is in the feeling. So that's where the truth lives. You can't think your way to healing. You really have to, feel your way through it, and that means coming down from the intellect into the sensation, into the emotion, into the discomfort. And I know that all too well. This situation, smoking weed was big ones, like almost more than 20 years of numbing. And
was it to numb, or what was the function for you? Did you enjoy it as a sensation as well?
Well, but looking back, it was mostly being terrified of just feeling things on a deeper level, and as a way of dissociating, really getting out of my body and more. Well, it brought me in my body. It gave me a lot of acceptance of things that were, but never really got me to work through things that I've been storing in my body. Mm-hmm. And dissociation doesn't always look dramatic. Sometimes it's just not being here and breathing deeply. I think that survival strategy kept me safe until I really felt it started killing parts of me. My creativity, my drive to put forth things, to create, to achieve, or to achieve is maybe not the right word, but to do something meaningful. Yeah. And for me, both plant medicine and somatic work really helped me to, first of all, return to the body. Plant medicine really cracked me open, and the somatic work taught me how to stay open. But I needed both.
And what do you then practically do? Because I really like that, and I can share my version of that. But I would love to hear, like, practically what's somatic work for you. What do you do?
So intentionally connecting with the body, not just working out and pumping iron, but yoga was a very important. Yoga practice was very important to cultivate that connection with my body. Breathing towards certain uncomfort in my body to access that and to release it. And now I have the privilege of guiding people in the process, preparing for working with plant medicine. So a lot of the things we do beforehand are breathing exercises, but also physical exercises, from shaking, just 5 minutes of shaking. All these super simple tools that put you back into your body, take you out of your head. And that is something I remember more frequently, that I can do that on my own as well when I feel discomfort. I always find it quite exciting to record something, and also to open myself up to these exchanges on screen. So before I sat down to have this conversation with you, I did like 5 minutes of just shaking in the living room. But what really works best for me is dancing, like movement with music, and then really trying to feel the music in my body and just letting my body express it without thinking, without trying to perform or making it look nice, but really, that's also why ecstatic dance is so popular nowadays, because that's also an invitation just to move and to release and use that healing power of music to access those states and to go beyond the monkey mind or the thoughts. And that is what grounded integration means to me. The ceremony showed me what was possible, and the body really taught me how to live it.
Beautiful. And also, thanks for sharing some of those practices and your openness about this talk. I had this when I was working at the first spiritual center where I teached before COVID. There was this really experienced lady. Her name is Eva from Felicitat Life is her website, and I think she's amazing. And she saw me and I saw her, and it was like an immediately sort of connection. And I think one of the things she said, like very early on, is that you already know the way to heaven, but now do you know the way to earth, right? Or can you bring that to earth? That's your challenge. And at that point, I think that was a little bit of a shift I was making in my meditation as well. Is I started to, at the beginning, I started to meditate just, especially I was looking out or picking a point to look out on, sometimes with eyes open, or I was just closing my eyes and spacing away. And then actually my thoughts would bring me back a little bit. And then at some point I got really good at basically deconstructing the mind, we could say. Also, when thoughts would come up, I would easily understand. This is after, of course, years of practice, but let's say after 8 years of practice or something, it's like very easy to see, oh, there is some resistance here, right? There's more than just the thoughts. This thought has something sticky. And then I would just focus on that. And with that, it would start to release. And I had certain techniques to do that. But so I was basically doing the two of those, or basically that, but I was forgetting the body, right? I was not doing anything with the body, and I've met quite some people like that they're really, you'd say, they're really tuned into this spiritual stuff, but they've forgotten to take in the body. And I think I met a yoga teacher also at one of these spiritual centers, and she was very much more yoga and related, and I think her entry she was also very much into plant medicine. So her entry was more, I think, the body. And she was looking at me and looking at my body, and she was questioning if I was actually like, are you actually spiritual? It's like, it was very, very interesting because, and I think I was looking at her in the same way because I was coming from a mental point of view and having talks with her and then seeing through her conditioning, but she was seeing through my body alignment, you could say, which is interesting because it almost becomes a sort of spiritual battle, right? Which I'm so glad I didn't engage in. But it almost feels like that when you're able to see each other's stuff, and luckily we were open to receive each other's stuff. So, but I think this is same stuff. So I started to when my spiritual awakening happened like 10 years ago. I also very closely after that had a Kundalini awakening. So my body was like shaking and stuff like that in meditation. So I was already through that getting a sense of the body, let's say, or an orientation toward energy in my body. But at some point, because my thoughts were so quieted down, this was, and I knew I had to go to the body and I had to go to those energetics in the body. It became sort of my main practice. But it's a very different practice because it seems like a lot less grandiose, right? But then you actually get to feel, like you said, all the trauma, a lot of the deeper conditioning is anchored or reflected at least by the body. So, and what you get when you release some of those energetic restrictions, or whether that's at the chakra point, which you definitely notice in things like that, but also in different points, let's say like the shoulders or the belly or things like that, is that every piece, this is also what addicted me to this journey in general, is that every piece that dissolves, you feel lighter. You feel like everything has more space. And then at the beginning, there's a little bit of disorientation, but that goes away like quite soon. And then it's like, I feel freer, I feel,
Yeah.
So then I was like, so I got a little bit too much into this at some point.
Yeah.
And then I need to be
Sorry.
normal again. I needed to, but I talked about that before. That was with burnout stuff.
Yeah, I love how you started that sharing. It reminded me of a different quote from Carl Jung. No tree, it is said, can grow to heaven unless its roots reach down to hell, which is really about, that quote really emphasizes that facing difficult and painful experiences, both internal and external, is like such a crucial part of the process of becoming a whole and integrated individual. Exactly what we're talking about, the individuation process. So yeah, it deeply resonates.
Yeah, one thing I want to share as well is like I had, I think part of why, let's say, my first sort of big spiritual experience happened was because I was in a sort of crisis. So I had like a lot of shit going on at the same time, like both with the company. I led a company at that point. The company was in trouble. My relationship was in trouble. The relationship of certain people around me were in trouble. So I just had like a lot of things happening at the same time, and I had this surrender come up as well. So it's sort of, when you surrender in difficulties, that's usually a big thing. And one of the things that came out of that was also me going to a psychologist and working with him. And he did EMDR, which I really like, that technique, on me on some, I think it was a bullying event when I was like in primary school. And I had this at a colleague where I had a lot of arguments with him at that time. And the arguments would always end with me at my desk, sort of, not wanting to engage, and like, okay. And I noticed that we did EMDR on that bullying event, and I went to the office, and at some point we had a fight again or a discussion, and it ended with me at his desk, like blah 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 blah, and then walking away. And when I walked away, I was like, "Hey, this is so different. This feels so good." Which, of course, now I would think like, "But why are you having these arguments?" But okay, there was this release from this 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 person I was, and that the tension that was on sort of this social settings related to that bullying event when I was like, I think 9 or 10. And that sort of, for me, started this whole thing of looking at my past, like trying to look at every difficult situation again and sort of sitting with it, meditating on it, actually the same way I did, he did with EMDR, but I did not the eye movements, but I just, sat with what I felt or what came up in different difficulties I had in the past, which, again, is a little bit extreme, but, I was, even ambitious in this.
Yeah. No, it's a great example. It's also often something I often read when it's about holding the tension of opposites. That sounds like that's exactly what you've experienced there.
It's almost like the pendulum swing of healing, huh? That you then are the perpetrator standing like this.
Yeah,
it's like meeting it in the middle could be a little bit better. But
and that's also why it's so important that people take responsibility for their own healing, because no one else can do it. No coach, no ceremony, no partner can feel it for you.
Mm-hmm.
The moment you outsource your healing, that's really when you disempower yourself. And that ownership is such a liberation.
That's so beautiful, and I wonder if you find that a lot, because in Amsterdam, like every big city with all this spiritual stuff, there's quite some you could say retreat or ceremony hoppers, or people that are consistently going to all these trainings and things like that. And even though these things are beautiful, I'm curious whether you see people like that and that have, in a way, in my opinion, outsourced probably part of this process, right?
Yeah, completely. I see it a lot, even in people attending ceremonies or even vipassana retreats, going from one peak experience to the next one, and not really doing anything in between. So that's also like the trap of the psychedelic hype, because people will think that the medicine will do the work for you, but it won't. It shows you the work, and that's a big difference. So insight without integration is basically spiritual entertainment. So if you're chasing bliss over embodiment, then you'll keep missing the point. And I feel the difference between insight over real development is, and you can see insight as the aha moment, and development is the it's boring, basically. It's brave work of walking that insight into your nervous system, basically. So into your habits, into your relationships. One is very exciting, and the other one makes it real.
That makes so much sense, because that's why I talked a little bit earlier about the spiritual practice, is that I almost wouldn't even talk about the peak moments, right? But I'm just interested in what's your normal standard, like how do you day to day live this, right?
Totally.
And that's interesting that you say like and do nothing in between, right? That because what do you usually recommend? Let's say for people that have psychedelic experience, what type of integration do you recommend for that?
There are so many different tools and practices that you can do, from journaling to meditating, creative expression, somatic exercises. But for me, the act of ritual is really powerful. And that's basically living every moment intentionally. So you could do the dishes as a ritual, just being there fully. I have a dishwasher, by the way, but then I put the dishes in the dishwasher, just being present in the moment. Or actually, cooking for me is very therapeutical. So,
and you're a great cook, by the way, I think so. Yeah.
Thanks. Yeah, I really enjoy cutting and timing things, and also enjoy, all the different flavors and tastes, and presenting it, really being there with the whole process. I shared this before. I think we had the talk even before. There's this series on Netflix, Chef's Table, and one episode there's this Korean monk, Jong Kwan, and she cooks. She's like a temple chef, or a monk basically, and she gets all these ingredients from the garden, and she explains that even picking the leaves for the herbs and making everything, she does it with so much intention, and even prayer, like putting loving thoughts and intentions into what she does. And you have all these big shot chefs from all over the world who've sat at every Michelin star restaurant all over the world, and they all said that I've experienced so many things in life taste wise, but this was on a whole different level. This was really like every bite was such a experience in itself, with depth, and it totally made sense for me, because that is what it's about, being fully present in the moment with every step, with every but yeah, to come back to your question, integration, is such a integration basically is a lifelong process, just as individuation is. In a sense, I think individuation is a lot like integration. It's about putting into practice what you've learned, seen. And I myself have learned more from holding discomfort than from chasing ecstasy. So the work really deepens when you stop running.
It's like with this whole shadow work stuff. Let's say you have, it's kind of like if you're in a dark space, right? And then you have a flashlight. Then when you actually work on the flashlight, right, you get a wider and wider view of the room. That's way more important than just looking everywhere like this. It's trying to bring awareness to it. So when you, maybe it's not the best metaphor, but when you sit with parts of yourself that hurt, they transmute. So your whole system has less hurt, because hurt is transmuted into let's say the normal feeling or joy or whatever. So with that, your whole system improves, actually. So often when people start on this journey, I say to them, you can only feel better from here, right? Because everything you encounter is something you'll transmute into something positive, or at least neutral. So sitting with your shit, so to say, is the only way to actually, or the best way to make sure that the room's clean.
Yeah. I love this quote from Joseph Campbell. The cave you fear to enter holds the treasure you seek. For me, that means like everything I avoided, every wound, all the shame, all the fear, that was actually my sacred ground, and my strength didn't come from bypassing it, but it came from sitting in the cave long enough to realize that the monster was just a scared part of me, basically. So it's really
Yeah.
about,
Little hidden.
yeah, exactly.
Definitely. Yeah. You're
That's
you could say source, or how I look at it is usually like source, but also your energy in general, or the unlimited energy, can only come through the inner child, right? And then through the inner child, it can go through all the layers to who you are now. And if somewhere there's this loss or this dissociation, you could say, then you actually get physically less energy. That's something I also have seen really with people, and have noticed with myself as well, that if I re-own certain parts or certain traumas, then it can, it energy can flow way better. So
totally. That's also why I feel that it's so important for people to do the work on themselves. To first of all, there's a lot you can say about what's happening in this rapidly changing world, and the madness we see now. And I've often felt really hopeless, looking at the so-called state of the world. And when I went really deep with that, even after going to Africa to do community work and trying to become vegan, to shine, to heal the world, so to say, I realized that, wow, if I do the work on myself, that ripples through in everything, because the world is made of individuals, and when I heal my projections, I stop perpetuating violence. And when I truly embody love, I ripple that into my partner, into my work, into my son, into everything. And that, yeah. So if you change the world, you change the world by changing in it, you can say. And that's why I don't believe so much anymore in well, I rather speak about what I truly believe in. I believe that if we do the work on ourselves, sitting with those hurt parts and go deep into allowing ourselves to feel those parts, then we show up as a more whole human being. In everything we touch also has those qualities. And if more people would tend to their own garden, then
yeah. And as
and green.
I think that's super beautiful, by the way. I just want to add one thing. As a former shadow work addict, it's like, is that even though you see parts of yourself that feel like they, that maybe they don't feel like they're in the best shape ever, then also accepting that and not needing to work on that. You can work on that, and if it feels right, but you don't need to work on that because it is already whole. Even like it's already energy. It's in a different form, and of course it's lovely to maybe create a nicer form or a way of that, but don't go digging around when there's nothing there. Right, so
no, there's always something there, but you don't need to.
No, but I mean,
will eventually present things anyway.
Exactly. So there's a certain timing or a certain sensibility to when things come up. You work on them, right? So there's two sides. Like the normal people out there who are not conscious of this, you would say, okay, please look inward because there's probably a lot of unconsciousness. But there's also people in this, like I was, that are just, shoveling around, hurting themselves with that, without, while actually at that moment, there's not something that has come up for them to look at. So it's also a process where you can enjoy the fact that there's nothing coming up today, because that means that you're having a good day. You don't have to forcefully look inwards then. You can do maybe some spiritual practice for fun, right?
Yeah.
But you don't have to force yourself to look inward. But that's the other side of don't turn a blind eye to when something is actually there, right?
Totally agree. But yeah, no one ever said you have to do it forcefully. I feel that if you like it or not, life will present certain challenges, especially if you're in a relationship. And it's easy to say, yeah, just try to accept it or let go. But how does that actually work if you don't have the tools or the... And then it's actually quite simple. It's just a matter of allowing yourself to feel what's there, which is difficult in itself, but that takes away all of these things you should do. And yeah, what we spoke of earlier, dissociation or distracting yourself. It's just a matter of not distracting yourself. Sometimes being alone, or for me, it helps to go out in nature and to take a walk and just to see what comes up then. And often it becomes clear that some kind of unsettling emotions or things that I've been pushing away or distracting myself from will naturally arise. And then it's a matter of being able to sit with it. But yeah, there's a price to true transformation. The price of true transformation basically is everything that's false and everything that's comfortable. You'll lose the masks that you loved and the habits that kept you safe, but at the end of the day, you'll gain yourself, and that's worth the grief.
Yeah, I agree, and being with it or feeling into it, I think that's also, that's super key. And just, you don't have to look for a big feeling, right? You can just think about it and then just be with that and see what sensations comes up. And if nothing comes up, you can also just be with that. But be gentle, right? Because especially with trauma, but also sometimes in general, it can be intense, and it's okay to then, slowly feel into this over several sessions instead of just diving in and forcing yourself to go hard, let's say. So
maybe even more than being gentle, it's about being compassionate.
Sure.
Yourself, especially.
Go at your own pace.
And that's
it's lovely to go.
Completely struggle with myself, I'm especially since I know from intellectual perspective, how to phrase these things, but in practice it still is super uncomfortable. Every new layer is inviting me to be more compassionate to myself, but sometimes I just totally am not, and I'm getting better at it as I go along, and it really helps to be able to talk about it with you here now, but also almost daily with my clients, and then that's such a reminder to myself as well to an invitation to put it into practice, basically.
And I think we have 1,000 other things to talk about, so let's make a part 2 of this. But I think it can become, and that's what I've talked about a little bit, but it can become the next striving. Like before there was material striving, and then there's spiritual striving. The whole thing is just to let go of striving because you're already whole, right? And then how do you let go? That's by allowing it to be there. It's just, okay, striving is also okay, right?
You can't transcend what you refuse to meet,
Yeah. Okay, see you next time, my friend Hidde, and thanks so much for this. We'll speak, and I put Hidde's links down below, so if you're interested in talking with him or checking out his work, then feel free to do so. Much love to you. Bye.
Thank you so much, Kees.
Sure. Bye-bye.